Alright, let's get on to those glyphs. Now, a couple of these are not really mandatory, and some of them are optional. However, because this is the spec I decided to go with, I found these glyphs to be the most efficient out of all of them. So let's start off with the first one. Glyph of Rune Strike. This basically increases its critical strike chance by 10%. So I would consider this one a mandatory. Next up, optional. Glyph of Dancing Rune Weapon. Now, this is considered optional simply because you're not always in an AoE situation, but when you are, having that extra threat is awesome. What this glyph does is it increases your threat generation by 50% whenever your Dancing Rune Weapon is active. Next up, Glyph of Blood Tap. Now, this is a no-brainer. You definitely don't want to be doing unnecessary damage to yourself whenever you're using Blood Tap, and you are going to be spamming it most of the time. So this glyph prevents that damage. Next is Glyph of Rune Tap. This basically allows you to heal your party for 5% of their maximum health whenever you use Rune Tap. How cool is that? Next up, Glyph Horn of Winter. This just adds an extra minute, so you're going to have a total of 3 minutes on your Horn of Winter. I would consider that mandatory. Glyph of Raise Ally. This one is optional. However, because you're going to be using Sacrifice a lot, this basically increases its health by 25%. Glyph of Heart Strike. Now, there are going to be times where you're not going to be using your diseases, so what this does is it increases its damage by 30%. So Heart Strike already hits hard, so by giving it more damage, it allows you to somewhat ignore the diseases whenever your survivability comes before avoidance. Glyph of Vampiric Blood. Now this one I consider to be very mandatory. Now what this does is it adds an additional 15% to your already 40% bonus healing received. However, it takes away that big chunk of stam you used to get. Now Glyph of Death Coil. This one is optional. However, because we are in the Lichborn spec, we want our Death Coil to heal us for as much as possible. So this increases its healing by 15%. So that's our glyphs. Let's go ahead and move on to a couple of other things. Now, for add-ons, I decided to pick up something called Blood Shield Tracker, and ever since then I found it to be extremely mandatory for any Death Knight tank. What it does is it monitors two things. One is it monitors your estimated heal, as you can see here at the bottom with this bar, and the other bar monitors how much your blood shield is worth. Now keep in mind that your estimated heal is always going to be static. And it's only going to change whenever you're receiving damage. Now Blood Shield Tracker is really awesome because it helps you determine when is the best time to use your Death Strike. And it's also going to show you how much you have left on it. It's just another way of keeping track of your survivability, which I find mandatory for Death Knight tanking. Next up is the foods I use. I don't use many. I only use Lava Scale Mindstone because I found this to be the most efficient one of all. It gives you 90 mastery rating and 90 stamina for 1 hour. These are really good. You definitely want to have a whole bunch of these in your bags because they both add to your Death Strike and to your mastery, so you definitely want to have that. And finally, I don't use the stamina battle elixir because, I mean, even though it's nice having a big chunk of stam, 300 to be exact, for the new Cataclysm ones, I found it much more efficient to have the battle elixir for mastery, because having more master is always better than having that little bit of extra stam. So you'll be able to absorb more and have a bigger blood shield. Let's go ahead and move on to your macro. For the first one, this one is optional. However, I wanted to have a macro where I can basically heal myself and use blood tap at the same time. So this is how you would go about it. Next up, this macro basically allows you to use your Raise Ghoul and Death Pack at the same time. And the cool thing about it is, if you notice this little number, that does is guarantees you won't be able to use your Raise Ghoul unless Death Pact is available, so you don't end up wasting it. This one is a bit unique. I don't think I've seen anyone with it. If they do have it, it's pretty cool. Thumbs up for you. However, I'm going to give you this little secret. Basically, aside from your Icebound Fortitude being your biggest cooldown, I decided to bind that with the Earthworm Potion, which is another thing you definitely want to keep in your bags. The Earthworm Potion grants you 4800 armor for a very long time, 25 seconds to be exact. So having these two things together makes the Icebound Fortitude even better. So it just allows you to receive less damage. You can't say no to that. And finally, the famous Lichborn macro. The only thing you would have to change in this would be the target equals. Here's where you would put your name, since you would be healing yourself with it. And that's it for the macros and your glyphs and a couple of foods and some add-ons. So that covers our first segment of the guide. Now I'm going to take you on a full hands-on DK tanking experience, so you can actually see how step by step your abilities can be used in various situations. So let's get to it.